Good morning, everyone. I see that I see it in your eyes. You guys are back and ready for more, and fully caffeinated, obviously. Um, I'm Zach Hunting. I'm on the advisory board of the Seattle Interactive Conference. So thanks for showing up and you know, representing on the second day. I am really happy and excited about this panel, the future of social advertising. Social in general is changing the world and going to change the world even more. And obviously advertising is one of the ways that we as marketers can use social. But I want to hand the mic over to Brooke from Admosis, who's a dear friend of mine, and let her introduce the rest of the panel. So give it up for these guys.
Hi guys, thanks for making it to the first session this morning, kicking off day 2 of the Seattle Interactive Conference with us. My name is Brooke Anglis, and I am the founder of Admosis Media. We're a boutique social advertising agency here in Seattle, and my co-founder somewhere here in the audience, Caitlin. We specialize in all things social advertising, so we're a small SWAT team that prides itself on being nimble. And I am humbled and honored to sit here next to Tyler Willis and Rebecca Kaykas-Wolff this morning. Tyler is from Unified Social, who you guys may have heard of, as well as Adobe, a little place down in San Francisco. They do some stuff. They're both here today to help share knowledge from their unique perspectives on social advertising. As absolute thought leaders, I really feel like it's a gift to sit here next to you guys and pick your brains today. It's going to be a really informal session. We just kind of wanted to let you guys listen to us chat, poke at each other, and shoot the shit this morning about social ads, because these are the real kinds of conversations that advertisers are having and arguing about on a daily basis, although this should be a pretty friendly chat, I think, this morning. We're all friends here. So with that, I'd love to let Tyler and Rebecca speak a little bit about the unique perspective that their companies have on social ads, and then I'll throw in my 2 cents and we'll kick it off.
So I'll kick off with just nobody wants to hear an infomercial, but I'll give you the quick kind of highlights over Unified. My name is Tyler Willis. I'm the VP of Business Development at Unified. We're a platform built specifically for social marketing. We help people understand insights, content, and advertising in Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and about a dozen other channels.
And I'm Rebecca, and I focus on our paid social advertising activities from a product marketing standpoint. Adobe has essentially 2 sides of our business, Creative Cloud and Marketing Cloud. Our monetization side of advertising sits in our Marketing Cloud, and our product is called Media Optimizer.
Awesome. So as for our end, we work with both of these companies, and we love them both dearly. Equal time. And for us, we spend a lot of time doing strategy and down really in the guts of the execution. So we do a lot of creative iteration, and we're pretty addicted to the power that these platforms give us to get smarter faster and to help our clients spend their dollars really, really efficiently. And it's visibility that you don't have as much of as quickly if you're running things manually. So that's kind of how the 3 of us tie together, and the differences in what each one of us brings to the table. So jumping right in, we've got a lot of themes to cover today, and at the end we'll spend some time doing a little AMA with you guys. So we encourage you to think about questions that you have for us. So to you guys, to start off, how would you say social is developing for digital marketers? What does it mean in terms of channel mix for you?
So in terms of channel mix, I think we have probably a little bit of a different outlook than you guys do, given that we're really focused exclusively on social marketing. And so what we're seeing is, to the extent we're seeing some migration from budgets off of platforms like search or display or TV into social, I think we're starting to see kind of some of the media mix stuff there. But really we're focused exclusively on when the dollar gets into social, how does it drive results, and how do you figure out whether that's actually driven ROI back to the advertiser. So maybe you have a little bit more of a outlook on the kind of cross-channel stuff.
Yeah, so obviously from a social perspective, it's part of your overarching integrated marketing mix. We all understand that. Adobe, because we have a cloud technology, we believe in kind of baseline analytics, and if you can measure it, then it can be a valued digital asset for you. We look at cross-channel attribution and believe that an integrated campaign is the way to go to market. We have depth in search, but we search and social and display, which means that when you flight a campaign, you want to look across channel to see your effectiveness and then optimize your bid and budget accordingly. So that's kind of the nuance for the way that we're looking at it.
And I would say from our vantage point, we always like to advise our clients that social is not to be treated as a standalone tactic, and you don't look at it as social objectives for social objectives' sake. It's really about understanding business objectives and then figuring out whether or not social has a role to play in supporting those. I think more often than not, we see that there is a place for social, either to amplify a message or drive some sort of depth of engagement and do so in a really measurable way. But it's definitely changing the shape of the way people spend their dollars. And we see a lot of clients that don't necessarily have incremental pots of money hanging out. So it really is about making trade-offs and trying to make smart, measurable ones. I think one of the benefits that social brings is that there are aspects of it that are much more measurable than some traditional techniques, like think billboards and print, for example. So what ways would you say then, as far as other digital marketing, what are the big differences? What are the meaningful differences in your opinion?
Meaningful differences in the different channels?
Between social and your other digital properties, and certainly between the two, like kind of the biggies of social channels.
Sure, and maybe actually everyone here in the audience, maybe you guys can help us out a little bit. How many, just quick hands, how many people are running social campaigns now or actively involved in social marketing?
Awesome.
Great. And how many brand side? How many are working for a brand? Okay, great. And agency, just to even out. Okay, great. So predominantly brand side, but it looks like most people have some experience in social. I think the most unique part about it is that you really have to spend a lot of time focused on kind of organizing both paid and earned to work together. And there's a reliance on content that I think is not necessarily unique to marketing, because content has always driven results, creative and advertising, these types of things. But it is a little bit different in social in the sense that there's kind of, I think, a concept of stock and flow, where traditionally as marketers, we've had to create kind of a few pieces of content and really create them at high quality and high scale, and then use those in an advertising campaign. And I think in social, it's a little bit more unique that we're seeing really a flow of content. As a brand, we might be creating 10, 20, 30, 40 pieces of content in a given day. And some of those are really lightweight, and some of them are up to scale of a car commercial or a really highly engaging piece of content. And so I think the challenge and the difference in kind of social as a channel against other areas is that there's probably a greater emphasis or requirement for you to be deeply involved in the creative process and to understand, kind of get a little bit of an early warning signal from when that content is working and how to put dollars behind it at that point, or at least increase the learnings that you can take from it and use those in the next part of the campaign.
Yeah, and I would just extend that by saying, the thing that we look at is we look at optimization techniques a lot. And for social, if you think about how you optimize search, it's all keyword targeting, right? How you optimize display, it's on a cost per impression level. Also, there's multivariate testing for creative. For social, we do all of those techniques, but then also added to that is sentiment analysis. So the context of what your community is saying, and how do you build targeting and optimization techniques around that. And that's kind of the exciting part, I think, when you're thinking about building advertising and monetization around social ads. And that's what makes it so intriguing, because you can actually, that's where the real-time bidding element and optimization stuff gets kind of cool.
And actually, just to add to that a little bit, one of the other things that at least we've seen as being really useful in social is time. Is kind of the velocity of the content, that's kind of a weird way to put it, but basically how quickly something is getting into your audience and then how quickly it spreads from there. We actually did a study that analyzed, if you take paid media within 24 hours of creating a content versus after 24 hours of creating content, you'll actually see that you get like 2 to 3x greater engagement, greater spread, and greater virality by kind of acting quickly once the content has been put out into the ecosystem.
Yeah, all about relevance, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think for us too, to the point of creative iteration, it's just a much more nimble environment than I think what you have seen through other types of advertising. So we can tell pretty quickly what's working and what's not, and what to do more of and what to do less of. And at the end of the day, one of the things that's a favorite of mine is we're able to bring back insights that help inform broader, less nimble, and more expensive tactics. So you think about, you are going to do the big TV commercial, or you are going to invest in a print piece that you can't just yank down if you realize it's not, doing what you'd like for it to do. We can take those insights and translate them into kind of a mini directive for our clients, or at least give them greater visibility to the pulse of what's happening and how their messages are resonating or not resonating, and let them go from there, which is a lot more information than most advertisers have had access to in the past, and it's much less assumption driven and much more data driven, which is, I think, really powerful, especially in a time when everybody's dollars are leaner than they ever have been in the past. So I think on that note, let's talk a little bit more about ads that are the most powerful from like a content standpoint. How do you feel about ads that don't look like ads? Are you seeing those work harder than ones that feel more clearly like unsponsored content? Or what do you see resonate the best there?
And so I assume this is kind of on the native versus non-native side.
Right.
I think you see a clear trend towards kind of native advertising, rather I should say towards advertising that looks exactly the same as content.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of social has done a really nice job of kind of claiming to be the inventor or new ground of this, although I think it's actually a pretty large historical trend. In fact, arguably search was the first area that this actually worked, right? Mm-hmm. With Google kind of inventing ads that looked like results. I think there's no doubt if you look at the results that those ads perform better when the ads are actually built for the experience that the consumer is expecting when they show up to the site. That type of ad works much harder than an ad that doesn't. And I think you're seeing the broad shift, for example, just take Facebook, away from right-hand rail and towards things that look like Facebook experiences.
We have clients that have basically set company policies to forbid right rail advertising.
We did a not a true A/B test, but more a day one, day two test with M&Ms, where we saw Q4 of last year we ran right rail exclusively. Q1
this is Facebook, by the way, in case anybody's. So go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, so these would be the ads that show up. They're kind of like mini display ads that show up on the right-hand side inside of Facebook.com. Yeah.
Yeah. Versus the news feed, which is like that main sort of central section where.
So just to finish that point quickly, but we saw a massive lift in every metric that mattered by switching over to newsfeed, and that's only accelerated by the fact that mobile devices have much smaller screen size, and therefore you really can't do an interruptive display ad the same way you could on the web.
Yeah, and I would extend that is that I fully agree. We also see a lot more effectiveness if you can actually tie and equate ROI or either lead gen or revenue generation materials to your social advertising buy. And so what we look at a lot is less brand and engagement level metrics and more direct response metrics. Mm-hmm. So actually tying to revenue growth for either retailers or lead generation activities for B2B entities. And so that page post ad within newsfeed to provide that context within that environment is hugely critical. We're seeing the same level of effectiveness through Twitter with lead generation cards as well as promoted tweets done well.
Right, and I think done well is the key. I mean, I've watched many very seasoned advertisers work to wrap their heads around what it means to write content that you intend to use in a sponsored capacity and have it still feel very natural, yet have a strong enough call to action for people to engage with it in the way that you want to and that you can measure, right? Because some of the more conversational, truly conversational stuff, if it doesn't lead the user down the path, then it doesn't at the end of the day end up working very hard for you.
I think one of the skill sets that I think a lot of our marketing teams lack, or one that's really frankly in demand and is underserved today, is traditional copywriting. It's understanding how to tell a story that really resonates with the consumer, that's not, buzzwordy or just kind of laden with what I think my manager wants me to tell the audience, but rather what they want to read.
Or ad speak.
Or ad speak, right? And I think being able to tell a concise story like that, but drive a clear call to action is actually a really kind of undersupplied skill set in the market today. I think a lot of times that frankly, half the books that we ask new members of our marketing team to read are around being better writers and being better copywriters.
Which is nice to see, the fact that this is becoming such a technology-driven space, along with the emergence of the channels and then the tools like yours that help really get the most out of them, that there's still a really important role and a critical role for creatives, and that without those two things coming together, that's a great indicator of a failure. And a lot of times you can spot failure before failure happens in social. It's not all about the wait and see how it plays. There are kind of earmarks of things that won't go well, and the creative aspect, there's tremendous dependency. We, as the three of us, have been talking a lot about the fact that social in general, and certainly social advertising, is still pretty young. And along with that, come some really exciting things and some tougher issues to deal with. One of the things is scalability and repeatability of consistently successful programs. We'll talk a little bit more about ROI through the course of this conversation this morning, but I'd love to hear you both talk a little bit about the challenges with the current state of maturity of social, and what you guys are both doing to help change that and work towards getting us universal metrics that everybody can speak to and sing from the same hymnal, and get programs approved more easily.
So as I talk about that, I also just want to cover off on kind of that sentiment around creative. Creative is the advertisement in social advertising, right? And so that is the important nuance of social. And so to Tyler's point around copywriting and creative composition of the ad type, that is all that it is. From a maturity perspective, I think that that's also an interesting segue, and that we all recognize, probably you all as practitioners recognize, that it's not an easy nut to crack right now. You've got different buying centers probably within your organizations. You might have agencies working on different components, which means that there's no centralized paid or social strategy within your organizations. We know that our customers are either brand marketers, they're media managers, they're advertisers, they're also traditional search and display buyers, which means that it's not super simple. They've got direct marketing metrics to meet. They've also got brand and engagement metrics to meet. So I think that we all kind of recognize that it's nascent. What we're trying to do is to actually tie a wrapper together from a platform perspective to help simplify and actually help connect the analytic components so that your leaders within your organizations can actually understand the impact that your social dollars can bring to your business. And so we look at things like assist reporting. We all know as practitioners that social assists in the buying or the consideration set within your marketing organization, but it's hard to quantify that all of the time without the right analytic capabilities. And so, you might have a report that says, gosh, this campaign resonated in social, but then the end action occurred in search, and there's a 7-day delta, for instance. And we do this for our customers to actually show that correlation to help build budget and scale within social organizations.
I think, to touch on that, I agree. I think it can, actually proving ROI can be very difficult. We actually internally do two things that are kind of interesting. One is we do deep dives on a relatively consistent basis at kind of different intervals and say, hey, where do we think our success is coming from? Where can we prove it's come from? And where do we want to kind of design experiments to look for success in the next period? But I think from a standpoint of the product that we deliver into marketers' hands, what we try to do is create a little bit of a simple heuristic that allows you to understand whether things are at least trending in the right direction. And so what we really look at is we look at two things. We look at top-line brand metrics, which is something that we call media value. So the idea there is of all of the activity that's happening inside of social, can you quantify that and then understand from that quantification whether you're getting enough activity that's justifying your investment. That's obviously a relatively soft metric in the sense that you're judging top-line awareness or brand metric. And then the second thing we do is we'll look at commerce, actual commerce data, either from retail sales or from e-commerce sales, and we'll report that back as a sales return on investment. And there you're looking at just a pretty easy revenue calculation of, did a dollar in net me more than a dollar out? And I think those are, it can be difficult to set up that system and to really kind of assign enough value to the measurement and getting the measurement right that you can actually make decisions off of it. But once you're there, it can be a really useful tool in kind of guiding your decisions.
Absolutely. I would just say that, we think about that as marrying the earned metrics along with the paid metrics so you can actually optimize and kind of protect your bidding strategy associated with that.
Yeah, I think that's, it's an investment to make to set up the proper types of tracking and get the systems in place. And that's usually something that as your organization is maturing in its perspective on social, it doesn't usually come day one unless you happen to roll with a really sophisticated enterprise with a spicy leader that, kind of is able to straddle the lines between marketing and technology. So it is an investment. On the lighter touch side, I think there are other things that you can do to help demonstrate tangible value. So if you know, for example, that your company has placed a value on an acquisition of a new customer or an acquisition of an email address, things like that, you can architect programs that are designed to help you capture that kind of information. So simple light touch things like Twitter lead gen cards, where you can start to feed in things that hearken to metrics that your leadership may already be comfortable or familiar with. So I would just encourage everybody in the room to, think close in, because sometimes you have to get some of those quick wins to justify further investment, and then have a plan in your mind of how you're going to build that over time, right? So what wins can you get today that you can prove that everybody in your org will get behind, and what things should you be looking at 6 months or a year and a half from now?
I would actually say, too, just to extend that thought, that it's really important that you understand where the center of excellence is within your organization. What is your organization the best at? Are you a communication-driven company and culture? Then start with the comms channel for your social investment, whether or not there's paid amplification tied to it or not. If you're more of a data-driven culture, start with your analytics base. I think that really understanding fundamentally what your company does best will help you mature your social strategy, irrespective of whether or not there's paid dollars attached to it or not.
So I'd like to talk for a minute in general about Convergence, and I think we'll touch on this more deeply when we talk about Twitter and their IPO, but there's this melange and commingling of social with other channels, both traditional and non-traditional. What are you guys seeing out there?
I think that social is kind of an interesting channel in the sense that it's basically conversation-based. This has become moderately unpopular, I suppose, to say from if you're a Facebook or a Twitter, because they're trying to build models that kind of make sense as more media channels. But at their core, they're a little different because they are conversation around topics that are happening of culture around us. And so I think inside of social, you're seeing conversations happen that are about television or about advertisement or about brands or just broadly about culture in general. And so I think Convergence is kind of an interesting challenge, specifically when you're looking at trying to measure all of that activity in social. And I think the big challenge that we have as marketers is we probably create a lot more social activity than we measure, because it's not just the first party created activity. It's not just the photo that we uploaded on Facebook or the tweet that we write. Or the campaign that we run, but it's also about kind of understanding all of the activity that's happening just kind of broadly throughout the ecosystem. And so I think as a marketer, understanding social listening tools, understanding social tracking tools from that conversation, the sentiment that you kind of hit on earlier, also things like installing social tracking on sharing of landing pages or sharing of commercials or things like that. I think that's a kind of a hard challenge to face as a marketer, but something that the nice part about it is if you do a good job of it, you can actually claim success for a lot more than just the first party stuff that you've done yourself.
I think also, rationalizing when you think about media spend, since this is a social advertising topic, when you rationalize media spend, really understanding kind of that second screen concept, which is why you're seeing TV level integration, especially on the Facebook and Twitter side of the business. We tend to look at the biggest media mix opportunity, which is why we have ads integration with Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. They provide the biggest kind of landscape from a media buy perspective. And so I think that that's, quite important. One thing that Tyler touched on was about kind of tracking and the complexity of tracking. We actually look at, just from a technical perspective, we look at view-through tracking capabilities and not only last-click attribution, which is kind of foundationally key to measuring the effectiveness of your social capabilities. And so that's just a thematic approach that we've seen the industry take on, because we know, again, that it's an assist channel that's part of a much bigger contribution to your marketing dollars.
Yeah, I was likening it earlier to pilots needing to be able to rely on their instruments, but also needing to have the skills to fly when the instrument panel goes out. So there's a lot that's trackable, and then there's some things that are tough to get your arms around. I think this conference is actually a great example. Some of the feedback that we've heard, our company helped do the advertising for SICK, and some of the things that we absolutely can't measure are just the response around, the caliber of the people and the visibility to the ad units and the chatter overall that's happening around SICK this year. And some of those things, we'll never be able to tie directly to what we did, but we do know that there's a difference between last year and this year, right? And so that's an overlay onto the tangible metrics that we'll put forward when we've all rested up after this thing.
I think there's always room for qualitative analysis. And I think that, frankly, everyone in this room, your job is to kind of layer qualitative analysis on top of the data, to take the data back and tell a story to the organization of, this is what happened, and this is the interpretation or the translation of that data into what it means for our business, and just being very honest and trustworthy in delivering those results. That's what creates kind of long-term success, because we're all going to make mistakes and we're all going to have things that we can't measure, and this is really just this will take us a decade or two to figure out how to get social as measurable as television or radio or other platforms that have been around forever.
Oh my God, I'm so tired.
And sometimes it doesn't work.
And that's okay, right? I think, some of our greatest success has been about educating organizations, educating our clients, and bringing them along on the journey with us, with always objectives of learning as part of the program, right? So it's not just about, I want to drive audience growth, or I want to drive engagement, or I want to drive purchase or views, or whatever it is, right? We always sit down and have very serious conversations about, what do you want to learn? What do you want to be smarter about when we come out the backside of this thing?
Yeah, to that point, we always encourage, a kind of an agile approach and a test and trial methodology to any kind of marketing program, but especially in social, because of that real-time and sentiment analysis component that you can't just look at the metrics and understand that, which is why the qualitative component is so incredibly key.
I think, not to kind of keep recommending books, but I think data literacy...
Tyler reads a lot.
That's terrible. I think data literacy is really kind of also one of those undervalued things that if you learn data literacy, if you learn how to kind of read what's happening and then add a story and kind of a qualitative description on top of that, I think that's, the next kind of 10 years of marketing careers, I think, will be built on the combination of storytelling and data literacy. And I think that's true more broadly than just outside of marketing. I think that's true in journalism and other areas as well.
Well, we'd love to get your top 5 book reading list at the end of this. That'll be my question in our AMA.
So what I love about that is that we all recognize that content and the creative approach is key. I think as marketers and as all marketers working for higher level of marketers, and you're trying to justify your contribution to the business, that's where the monetization component becomes so key, which is why the data becomes so key. And so the ability to measure that is just critical in order to be actually great storytellers and content marketers.
And I think having for me as a creative person kind of at the core, it's actually pretty amazing to have the data help guide the choices that I make, right? So if I know that close-up shots work better than pulled back shots, and shots with eye contact work better than profiles, and brand shots for a particular brand don't perform well at all, that's really empowering to my process. So when I go into the phase of producing with my team a whole vault of ad units, I'm constantly getting tighter and tighter on the stuff that's going to perform the best for us, and then reflecting that back to the business in other ways that they can use. So I think for the back half of the chat, I'd love for us to dig deep into kind of the two channels with the most scale, which not surprisingly is Facebook and Twitter, and kind of probe at those for a little bit, get down into some nuances of the channels, and even some tips perhaps if we have time at the end. So let's start with, let's pick on the giant. Let's talk about Facebook and some of the strengths of the platform that have emerged, especially since their IPO, and some of the places where they still really have some room for improvement. Let's talk about struggles. Let's have therapy.
I think a couple of the things we've already touched on are good strengths. So they've done an excellent job of doing content-based advertising. They've done a reasonably good job of training the market around that. I think the mobile, which is a year ago, I think we would have been up here talking about this is the big fear that they can't tackle that. I think they've shown that they can tackle that and do a really good job with it. Mobile's actually a huge driver of their kind of ad revenue growth. So I think those are a couple of the strengths. Where I think the predominant weakness lies is just in its newness as a channel. I think they're still, and they're kind of trying, I think if somebody from Facebook were here, they'd probably agree, that they're spending a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to make it easier to measure what's happened, trying to make it easier to tie business success back to the platform. And I think you can see the acquisition they did of Atlas as being a precursor for that, and a lot of the work that they've done in their measurement APIs over the last 3 to 6 months. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, definitely. I think too, though, that there's also this natural rationalization that any kind of media network needs to consider. It's like, what kind of media entity are they? And there's kind of search-focused activities like the FBX components and the retargeting mechanics that you can drive through the platform, which has seen nice growth. The fact that you can actually do retargeting through page post ads now, which means in the main body and newsfeed, is a great enhancement. I think also, though, many media-focused advertisers see Facebook as a display capability without the maturity of other display entities, meaning that they lack the same kind of standardization. And so I think that, obviously streamlining and maturity is happening, and then rationalization of how you need to conceptually think about these platforms as media buying activities. The same thing with Twitter, right? Twitter is a fairly new media channel, kind of got started from more of a PR and a communication network, so to speak. We're seeing tremendous growth and innovation on the direct response side of Twitter and arguably Facebook, as social marketers need to mature their businesses and drive ROI accountability or revenue positive results for their organizations. And so I see that as the opportunity through both of these channels, and then LinkedIn is in there as well.
You said something interesting there, which I think was kind of simplification, which I think also kind of hints at another part of this problem, or another, at least part of the challenge, is that if you're Twitter or Facebook and you're trying to kind of, test lots of things and invent the model that advertisers and users are going to use your product for, I think it naturally leads to this point where you end up with a relatively confusing product. Show of hands, how many people have gotten confused at some point by Facebook ads, right? The fact that I think they had 22 or 23 different types of ad units at some point not too long ago. And I think a big part of the first era of kind of helping marketers on Facebook was around acting as kind of help and educating and shocks around that ever-changing platform. I think what's really nice is that you're seeing a really mature organization now come out of Facebook post-IPO. You're actually seeing ad units being removed and consolidated, moving towards a few types of experiences that work really well for advertisers, rather than the let's launch a new ad type, or ad unit every 3 or 4 weeks, which we saw kind of for the year leading up to the IPO.
And in addition to that, the right capabilities to measure and optimize underneath, right? So you've got to have the ability to customize all of your targeting and treat your targeting parameters just like you would on a display buy. And so they're making all of those investments, which is exciting to see.
I think, from our vantage point, probably the biggest strength of Facebook is the sophistication around segmentation and targeting, using parameters that you don't have through many other forms of advertising. So the level of specificity that we can achieve is really compelling to us. It's only as compelling as we choose to customize messages to map to those specific segments. But that's one of the things that we love the most about Facebook. There's still some significant challenges, I think, with the platform. Some of that is hangover from the chronic changing and the confusion that has, caused for our organization at times, but certainly for our clients and our partners. That confusion, I think, can be kind of paralyzing and leads to people drawing their own conclusions or just saying, you know what, I'm not really going to double down here until I'm confident that these guys have their shit together. And, for those of us who are closer to it, we believe that it's certainly worth continuing to, really heavily invest in. But you can also see it through the lens of somebody who's making tough trade-offs with their dollars. If they're feeling freaked out about it, it becomes a harder decision for them to make. Other places that I see opportunity for Facebook certainly are that they're still a relatively young organization, and we forget that. These guys, how old is Facebook now? They're wee lads.
8 years.
8 years. And, they've come a long way. They've grown really, really fast. But part of that, I sort of see them as being pubescent in many ways, which means, not all the body parts quite match each other yet. And it can be a little awkward. Sometimes the dollars relative to, being able to pick up the phone and call somebody and get support. Sometimes those things are break down. That is one of the nice things that I will say personally about being able to work with guys like Unified and Adobe, or us directly for our clients, is that you get somebody else to call that kind of has greater visibility to what's going on, and so that's super important. Let's talk a little bit about where you guys think Facebook might be heading. Like, what do we think is next? One of the things that is so amazing for us, staying close to the channels and also close to Adobe and to Unified, is that there's visibility to kind of glimpses of what's coming, right? And how do you get on the forefront of betas? So I would love to hear you guys talk a little bit about like what you guys see coming down the path that you're able to talk about.
Sure. So I think to your point earlier, that Facebook is still growing and still is an incredibly innovative organization. I actually love, if you go to Facebook's office, they have posters all around the wall that say...
What do they say?
Well, there's a bunch of them.
Oh, I was going with move fast and break shit.
Well, move fast and break things is the one that they're famous for. However, there's posters all over the wall that say this journey is only 1% complete. And if you look at what they're building, they still have a long way to go towards being kind of the full, mature business that they can be. And so I think they're still innovative. I think they're still changing things. I think there's still quite a lot of, product launch that's coming and these types of things that we have to pay attention to. The difference is I think they're starting to be refinements rather than, truly disruptive innovations. Rather than sitting in this room and thinking your challenge is to keep up with the 20 new ad units that are going to launch in the next 2 years, the challenge is really going to be more about how do you adopt the new products that are coming out, the new depth of these products, to show kind of measured, deliverable business results. I think the other part of this kind of challenge is it's not just that it will mature as a media channel, but actually that it's going to also make us mature as an organization. So it will make all of us in this room change the way that we kind of deliver our marketing and deliver our advertising by getting our content teams and paid teams closer, by really kind of, I think, hopefully this is maybe a bit idealistic, but I think kind of breaking down that barrier and that wall artificial split between advertising and marketing when they're really two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the fact that Facebook has shareholders to appeal to now, right? And so with that comes revenue maturity, right, with how their business is run. And so as a result, you have to build in the appropriate levels of KPIs. You have to streamline so it's actually a valuable media channel. Where both of our companies are part of the SPMD program, which means that we've got early access to a lot of the API capabilities, as well as a lot of conversations with our Facebook counterparts. And what I find intriguing is that Facebook wants to move away from only being known as a social moniker, because it's part of something bigger than just a social channel. And I think that is a step in the right direction to maturing as a relevant media entity. I don't know if any of you follow kind of what analysts say in the analyst community, but I think Altimeter Group always does a nice job at explaining the maturity model in social and social business maturity, and really understanding kind of where we are on this early adopter curve. We all understand the business and we believe in it, but from a shareholder and a marketplace perspective, without simplification, repeatability, and maturity and measurement, it's a nice to have, not necessarily a necessary in your marketing mix. And so that's where we actually invest a lot of our time, is on the analytics side, because of that necessity from a bigger brand standpoint.
And I think you see companies like ours invest in analytics. You also see Facebook investing in it.
Absolutely.
Yep. And I think that's, I don't know if everyone here knows, but if you've seen like the optimized CPM products that have come out of Facebook, if you've seen the kind of measurement products that are coming out of Facebook, their partnerships with Datalogix and Nielsen, they're making huge investments in creating measurement and analytics. And I think that that will only continue and will only accelerate, and B, it will make all of our lives easier, because we'll have a framework and a technology to ride on that's kind of native to the ad serving environment, native to Facebook.
I think they got dogged pretty hard during their IPO, but the truth of the matter is, like, for us as advertisers, that was the fire that was kind of lit under their booties that really turned a corner meaningfully from the ad products that they had pre-IPO and post-IPO. When we talk about things like FBX, for anybody who's not familiar with that, that's retargeting on Facebook, meaning that if someone's visited your website, you can cookie them and then serve them an ad in Facebook based off of what they looked at. And if you're curious as to what that looks like, just shop Nordstrom and then go to Facebook. They do a pretty bang-up job with it. I buy more shoes. I mean, those shoes just won't leave me the hell alone. But that's not a bad problem to have. And then things like custom audiences, where you can take your email list and for the first time, encrypt that data and push it into Facebook and look for a matchup, right? And try to convert people that have a pre-existing affinity for your brand and have raised their hand through, a traditional CRM type of situation, and then convert them into people that have, an easy way to engage with you through social. So you get more multi-channel approach and better pull through. So that's one of the great things that we've seen happening, in just a very recent period. And I think that IPO that Twitter's staring down the barrel of, hopefully will herald more amazing things for them as well. But before we move on to Twitter, we wanted to talk a little bit about the impact of Facebook on search and display, and what Facebook advertising is doing to the dollars that have been carved out for those two things, and if it's eroding it or bolstering it. What are your thoughts on this? I think you'll both have different opinions.
This is where we get the boxing match on stage.
It's mean. Yeah.
So from our standpoint, obviously, we're looking at the shift of dollars into social. We don't help with executions in display. We don't help with executions in search. With that said, we've seen, now an increasing number of campaigns that are both beating kind of effective CPA goals in search and display, as well as seeing budgets shift from some of our advertisers directly from search and display into Facebook. So I think if I look at those, what channels or what platforms are competitive, I think Facebook has a huge opportunity to take a lot of dollars out of search and display. But you may have a different opinion.
Not necessarily a different opinion. I just, we recognize the importance of looking at a campaign in totality. You're going to work on executional differences depending on the channel that you're flighting, but we live in an omni-channel world. And so we all are exposed to media in a lot of different areas. We want to optimize that media from a digital perspective from one platform capability so you can actually see end-to-end result. And we're believers in that approach because as marketers need to rationalize and consolidate all of their marketing spend above the line as well as below the line, meaning kind of TV versus digital dollars, that need to drive efficiency is of utmost importance. And so, the conversation around search in particular, search yields amazing lower funnel conversion results. We all recognize where search, plays in our digital businesses. It's not always been that way. However, search also doesn't necessarily control the biggest amount of kind of media dollars. We understand that kind of broadcast and brand dollars really control that media spend and are their largest bucket of money. But as agencies and brands alike are trying to say, you know what, we actually really want to see where that dollar is spent and what movement that is attributing to my bottom line revenue, that's where social can actually take that brand dollar and make something happen out of it and have quantifiable results as a part of that. So I see it as all complementary. Yes, you will see some leveling out based on your executional strategy. Some creatives and some campaigns are perfect for display, some are perfect for search, some are perfect for social with a broadcast mix attached to it.
Awesome. I'm going to move us to Twitter. So let's talk really quickly about how it's different from Facebook and what we think the IPO is going to bring for Twitter.
I actually think we spend, just because it's easy to do, we spend a lot more time on the IPO than matters. I think both these organizations.
Sorry, let's not talk about the IPO.
No. I think we should talk about it, but I think it's important to note that I think both of the organizations are more like, they operate more like an Amazon than they would like a traditional public company in the sense that, they're going to make long-term investments. They're willing to make investments in growth rather than optimize for short-term revenue. Maybe not quite to the extent that Amazon's willing to do that, but certainly they're more on that side of the spectrum. I think the IPO for Twitter will kind of at least expose us to the metrics of their ad business in a way that we obviously haven't had access to before. It will probably go a long way to legitimizing them in the public mind of, yes, this is actually a relatively large and active ad channel. I think there's still, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and when I go back to Ohio, people still ask me, how is this thing going to make money, right? Like, isn't this thing going to go out of business soon? And so there's still a large perception that this is not a real business, and I think that will change dramatically not too long from now. But other than that, I think that it's likely we'll see we'll continue to see innovation in ad products, but probably at about the same rate and about the same activity that we've seen pre-IPO. I mean, Twitter has spent the last 2 years really heads down focused on building ad products and consumer products that support the ad products. And doing a pretty good job of it. I mean, we did the Facebook poll earlier, but are people here doing Twitter advertising? Or are you involved in Twitter? Okay, so to a much less deeper extent than Facebook. So I think that shows that there's still a lot of growth area for them. If you haven't taken a look at their ad products in the last year or two, they're dramatically different. If you haven't taken a look at the ad products in the last
few months.
2 months, they're dramatically
The
different.
TV integration stuff is it's crazy town, right? And that's where Facebook is, kind of coming for search and display. You talked a little bit the other day about how Twitter is kind of that beast nipping at television.
Well, it's cool, right? So there's TV ad targeting capability that both of our platforms pull in that targeting opportunity. You can do it directly with Twitter as well. But what that means is if I'm a brand and I'm running TV advertising, I can also target those same users based on that TV ad kind of targeting capability and run Twitter advertising at the same time and basically have that marriage of second screen. Because we all know that when we're at either a live event or watching TV or video, we're also on our phones or our iPads or our devices. And so combining those experiences is really where kind of this broadcast approach is going. I feel like, just to answer your question though, I feel like it legitimizes the business that is social and social advertising with these companies. Twitter's IPO is being valued at 10 billion? That's not a little number. There is huge growth opportunity in these spaces, and the key will be to get the right level of investment to mature them and create this necessary, repeatable cycle that needs to happen within both Facebook and Twitter. And then there will be a lot of other emerging technologies that come out as well.
Awesome. So let's just close out with a nugget on measurement. Metrics that matter, the real metrics versus the invented metrics. I think it's something we could leave everybody with as a parting shot before we take some questions.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about this kind of prior to sitting in the room just prior to this talk. There's been, historically, when you look at Facebook, when you look at Twitter, you're valuing metrics that are not key revenue drivers, right? You're valuing clicks or engagement or social activity. I think that those are obviously really necessary kind of stepping stones to finding success on the platform, because 4 years ago, frankly, it was very hard to draw direct ROI information back from the platform. But we've come to a point now where the maturity in the ecosystem is there that you can actually get past just these social metrics and get directly to what is this doing for my business and where am I finding revenue and where am I finding success.
Yes, I would agree. What I was going to say though, when Tyler was talking about the ability to track a click and engagement level metrics, what I do find, again, interesting and compelling is that we know that when you actually start to build targeting parameters around those engagement metrics, you actually yield even better conversion results. And so you use those as targeting parameters, just from the geeky aspect of that.
I love it. You guys feel like asking us some questions? We can keep talking all day.
Just
Maybe
use
you'll
the
step to the mic.
mic here in the center.
Just really quick, if you have a couple tips about Facebook advertising in regards to the bidding process and maybe how long to run a campaign to see effectiveness.
Sure. So I think obviously these things can kind of vary campaign by campaign. What I think is the more you can test activities, the better. The more that you can test kind of different campaign targeting segments against each other and really break out those targeting segments into individual campaigns so they're not competing with each other, the better. I think in terms of kind of how much data do you need before you can understand whether something is a significant learning, I think it's not much, actually. I mean, we can see things off of, for small campaigns, kind of the initial learnings, a couple $100, we can start finding, is this working, is this resonating? Obviously for much more complex campaigns, kind of multiply that number by the number of campaign kind of targeting parameters that you're trying to test. But you can find learnings pretty cheaply and pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would agree, and we do that on the retargeting side as well as the newsfeed side. I think the key is making sure that you're running at least some kind of controlled multivariate component. So because the idea is to test the creative and your targeting strategy associated, but the dollars aren't as important as what your content and creative mix would be in that test.
First of all, I am not the social media person in my company, so I'm going to apologize in advance for the basicness of this question, but given the raised hands about the question about confusion about Facebook ads, this might be relevant to other people in the room. I'm just wondering if you could give us a basic idea of what is available in advertising on Facebook and on Twitter. You mentioned the right rail. Can you just give us some specific examples of what kind of advertising is available in social media?
Sure. So there's we'll go through a handful of products. On Facebook, there's really kind of two different distinctions. One is in newsfeed or outside of newsfeed, which would be right-hand rail. Most of the ad opportunities are moving to within newsfeed there, kind of reflecting the shift to mobile. The types of ads that you can put there are kind of app install or engagement ads, which are if you've got a kind of mobile app, you can run ads that are kind of pushing that. There's content ads that are kind of page post ads, which is what Rebecca was talking about earlier, which are reflecting content you've created on your Facebook page, and really just you're sponsoring more people to see that content. There's FBX, which is kind of using outside retargeting data.
It's a display buy,
Yep.
but you retarget through Facebook.
And then there's a host of targeting on top of these types of ads. Twitter's a little easier. There's promoted tweets and promoted accounts, which are basically just showing up inside of the top of the timeline on Twitter when you're scrolling through your tweets. And then in anywhere where they're calling out promoted accounts, you can kind of buy the chance to increase your audience in that unit. And then there's also search, where you can kind of advertise yourself against the promoted trends. And again, there's a layer of targeting that exists on top of that.
And then there's also lead generation cards within Twitter that allow you to go a level deeper just with collection of data. It might be the Twitter handle or other data components that you can actually use for lead generation purposes within your company.
I think one of the most interesting things that we've seen change with Twitter is that Twitter used to very much, to me at least, feel like a handoff. It was a pass-through channel where you'd click a link and you'd end up winding up somewhere else. And now Twitter seems like they're working really hard to pull more of the experience into Twitter so that you don't have to leave the environment. So things like lead gen cards or product cards, which are coming where you can do more shopping-like behavior within the Twitter environment. So that you don't have to leave.
Yeah, really good thing to kind of read more about is just the effort that Twitter's doing with Twitter cards. And it's really just creating small kind of HTML canvases that you can add experiences into your tweets.
So of all those ad types, before we take the next question, do you have a favorite?
I love them all equally.
Oh, so diplomatic. Give me the real answer. No, he's just
depends.
smiling. Oh, gosh. Okay.
I feel like we're looking for that like network moment. It's not the greatest, right? Like, it's not the greatest country in the world.
Fight me for it. All right, we'll take the next question since these guys aren't going to answer me.
Sorry, I'm short. So I work for a really small nonprofit, and I am the social team. And so I don't have a budget. I do social all organically. There's no money involved. And we have a pretty decent amount of engagement. And I feel like I've had a lot of room to kind of play around with what gets certain demographics more involved. But what kind of advice do you guys have for people in my situation that are with a really small project, don't have a budget, and rely pretty much solely on the value of their content to get engagement?
I can speak to that a little bit because we work with some nonprofits where budget's always an issue, and even if you're not a nonprofit, budget's still an issue. We see nonprofits rely heavily on fundraising tactics, on building their CRM and then communicating with that CRM. Oftentimes it's through things like print materials, like they'll do mailers, more traditional tactics that have bigger expense associated with them. And we've really spent a lot of time educating those clients on kind of making the transition between the annual print mailer and carving off a little piece of that budget to try to go test out. Usually we start with things like audience growth, right? So that they can try to get more people that they can ultimately use for fundraising later. So that's one of them. I mean, they're incredibly powerful tools within Facebook for targeting. They recently came out with something called partner categories, and that's through partnerships with DataLogic and other credit reporting. But you can actually target people based on their past contributions to causes, right? And so, through things like that are specifically tied to a handover of cash, not just raising your hand and saying, I like the American Cancer Society. It's like, no, this person's actually donated in the past. That's a pretty powerful thing to be able to say, I'm going to take this tiny little bit of money and focus it in so specifically on people with the behavior you want, who also have interests in the kinds of concerns and issues that you're pushing for. It's a conversation changer, at least it has been for us. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add.
I was just going to add, too, that from a content strategy perspective, and I think that this is a good rule of thumb from an enterprise all the way on down to a nonprofit with a team of one, that enlisting who your ambassadors are through engaging content is your #1 priority for any of the, from a social engagement perspective. Then, depending on what's resonating the best, you put some paid media behind that to surface it through probably newsfeed.
And
right?
it doesn't
If you've
have to be
got-
much
it
to give
doesn't
it like
have
a
to be
little,
much, and your goal is
like
to
you could
enlist,
self-fund it for $15.
to
I'm not
enlist
kidding.
excitement and growth, right?
And so that was my next question is what's the value in those kind of one-off, like, $30, $15 promoted things? I've heard a lot of chatter about, you do that, but then you have to keep your engagement numbers up to keep it rolling. And so it's just this kind of perpetual thing where it's like, oh, I promoted this, this post, but then it starts to go down. And so you have to promote another post. And so it just turns into this.
Well, the reality is that, especially in Facebook, as they're maturing their platform, and as marketers, we have to understand and respect that that is a business,
Sure.
right?
Totally.
And so if you put paid media behind it, it's so your messages actually get seen more consistently. And that's just part of the way that the platform works. I don't know if you have
Yeah,
additional.
so I used to run marketing for a startup, which is just an intentional nonprofit, or an unintentional nonprofit. I think the easiest way to think about this, and maybe just a little bit different from what you guys have said, is it's the one platform where, while it is much, much, much harder, you actually can compete on the merit of your content. And so I think it's not easy. It's hey, it's much easier to have budget, but I think it actually is an environment where you can get great engagement with people through great content. Where I would focus the budget is on, if it's only $30 or $50, where I would focus that budget is on two places. One is on the specific kind of key metrics for the business, like fundraising asks, things like that, or content. I'd keep a very close eye on the content that's like really exceptionally different and higher performant than everything else. Keep an eye on those real-time reports to figure out what content's spiking and back those. And I think last question.
I think we're
last
out of time.
question.
Yeah.
Hello, I also have a nonprofit run by one person. I find the Facebook ads run pretty much neck and neck with what I spend to what I get, and then you never know if you're reaching someone else. Just as they've done something recently where if you try to put $15 in, the one turns into a 5. I'm not joking. And it's something, I don't know. But anyhow, I've managed to get beyond that. But I have a basic question about the ads. So if you target people according to their location, you can't target your the fans according to the location. That's what I've noticed. It's either an either or. Is that the current situation?
What I would do is I would take a look at the Power Editor, which allows you a little bit more targeting options.
You can customize, yeah.
Yeah, and there you could do that targeting.
Okay, so it's not just in the ad part.
Yeah, just
This is
search Facebook Power Editor. It's a little bit more of an advanced tool set. It's got a steeper learning curve, but it lets you have a lot more
Okay.
useful tactics.
I didn't know about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks
you.
for coming.